Hi, I'm Jennifer LeBeau. I'm a realtor here on Philadelphia's Main Line. Welcome to the 9th installment in my Home Buying in PA 101 video series. This video is all about making an offer and the nuts and bolts of doing that in the state of Pennsylvania. So it might be a little dry, but I'm hoping it'll be informative for those of you who really want to know exactly what you have to submit and what you fill out on the agreement of sale. So if you are getting a mortgage, the very first thing that you need to do is make sure with your offer that you have your pre-qualification letter from your lender. It says how much they'll lend you and at what rate of interest. In Pennsylvania, you'll also be submitting something called a Buyer's Financial Information Form. The BFI asks you about your income, your assets, and your liabilities, things like car payments or student loans, because the seller wants to see that in order to determine that you definitely have the money you're going to need, not only for your down payment, your portion of cash that you're spending on the purchase, but your closing costs as well. A little aside here, I have a separate video all about closing costs in Pennsylvania, and the reason that I do is that closing costs here are very high. They're often around 4.5% of the purchase price, and that is cash. It's not financeable money. So that buyer's financial form needs to show enough liquid funds that you have the money, again, not only for the down payment, but also for the closing costs. Please make sure before you sign any offer that you have received from your agent or your lender, but it's better from the agent, a copy of their estimate of closing costs so you don't have a big surprise. So back to that buyer's financial information form. You need to make sure you have enough liquid cash to make the down payment and cover the closing costs. If you are a cash buyer, you will just need, instead of a pre-qualification letter and a buyer's financial form, you'll need something from your bank that just verifies that you have the funds that you need. So you're making the offer, you've got that financial piece, whether you're a cash buyer or someone using a mortgage, you've got that piece done. Those pieces of paper are done. What else do you need? Well, remember that seller's disclosure that you read? You have to initial it and sign the last page to show that your offer is taking into account all of the things about the property that the seller has indeed disclosed. You're also going to need a copy of the first deposit check. This is kind of a silly convention, but it is a convention nevertheless in Pennsylvania, that when you submit the offer, you send a scan or a copy or even a picture of a check that has the first deposit made out to the listing broker for your deposit money, which will be held in escrow until settlement. Now, the reason I say it's sort of silly is that a photograph of a check is meaningless. Nobody can cash it. So really, you could write a check and put $3 trillion on it. Doesn't really matter. But for whatever reason, that is the convention here. So if you're coming from out of town and looking at homes and you think you might be writing an offer, bring your checkbook. Everybody needs to submit those things. And then the big one is the actual offer, the agreement of sale that you're going to fill out, and it's going to explain all of the things that you want and the way you want this transaction to work. So that agreement, first thing you're going to do is write in the offer price, how much you're offering. Then you have to stipulate the first and second deposits and their due dates. So the first deposit we just talked about, that's going to be due in a certain number of days. The default on the Pennsylvania agreement is 5 days. You can change it, but the point is you're saying that I will make sure that my check is in the listing broker's office within that number of days, and you have to stick to it. The second deposit. Second deposits are not required, but they are very, very common here, and they are usually deposits of a larger chunk of money that come after the inspections have been completed and the negotiations have been completed. So after the buyer and seller have agreed, the seller is going to repair a certain thing or is going to credit the buyer a certain amount. Once that's all been figured out and an addendum has been signed talking about all those things, the second deposit will be due. Again, it says in how many days. I always write within 2 business days of satisfaction of inspection contingencies. But whatever way it's written, you are going to be obligated to get that second check at a certain point. After that, as you continue through the agreement of sale, the next thing you're going to fill in, or your agent's going to fill in, is the settlement date. So you'll talk about what makes the most sense. Most lenders, keep in mind, don't like to commit to less than about 5 to 6 weeks. So just keep that in mind. Then there is the offer expiration date. The offer expiration confuses some people. The concept is that when you, the buyer, make an offer and write this offer and submit it to the seller, that you want an answer within a certain amount of time so that you can know if this is going to work out or if you should be looking at other things. If there were no expiration date, consider this scenario. You write an offer, you submit it to the seller. The seller doesn't respond. He's maybe just waiting around to see what other offers he gets. And meanwhile, you're looking at other properties. Well, you find another house that you think you want to make an offer on. If seller number one signs the offer eventually, if it has no expiration date, then you're obligated to move forward in that transaction, which means you're not going to be able to put an offer on this other house you found. So the buyer writes in an expiration date, and the buyer doesn't have to stick to that. If the buyer and the seller are negotiating beyond that, they come to a new agreement, different price, different settlement date, you can still make those changes and everybody signs them and you initial any changes. Or if that seller does decide to wait 4 days and then comes back to you and says, I want to sign it as is, but I see that this expired 2 days ago, you can say, that's okay, we'll change the expiration date or we'll initial that it's okay. So it's your choice. It's just so that you don't get caught waiting around for a seller and that prevents you from maybe looking into another property. Then you'll have to make a list of inclusions and exclusions. So these are usually things that people, they're in gray areas. They're often appliances like the washer dryers and any refrigerators or freezers that are not built in. You want to say, is this going? I don't want it. It's old. I want the seller to get rid of it. Or, hey, I like that. I want that washer dryer. That's included. I want that to stay. Some other things that are a little hazy can be outdoor play sets and sheds. Should make sure that that's clear. And the other thing that I usually address is window covering. Sometimes if somebody has curtains, the curtain rod is installed, so it's considered attached to the house, and therefore, according to the Pennsylvania agreement, it goes with the house. But the curtain itself, the piece of fabric, isn't. So you just want to say, do I want all window treatments and hardware? Do I want window treatments and hardware removed? So that inclusion and exclusion, those lines are to explain all of that. The next section that you need to fill in is the mortgage section. Who's the lender? What dollar amount are they lending? And what percentage of the purchase price is that amount? The next section, and probably the last thing that needs to be filled in, is the inspection contingency section. This section has about, I think, 11 inspections that you as the buyer can elect to have done. The ones that most people do in this area are the home inspection, which can cover the main home inspection as well as a stucco inspection if you wanted to do one, a lead paint inspection, anything about physically in the house. Most people around here also do a termite inspection and a radon inspection. Radon, if you're not familiar with it, is an odorless, colorless gas, can build up. There is some evidence that in laboratory rats over a certain number, it can cause cancer. So people often have that test done. There's a system, a radon remediation system that can be installed if there is radon, but that is usually an inspection that is elected. Now, when I talk about electing inspections, what I'm saying is when you choose to elect an inspection, you're saying my purchase is contingent on my satisfaction with the results of these inspections. So if I'm not satisfied, or if I say I would be satisfied if the seller were to do such and such and then the seller doesn't, it allows you within that time frame, remember we talked about time frames, whatever time you have for the inspections, it allows you to walk away and get your deposit money back. But there are well and septic inspections. If you're looking for at a property that has water from a well and is on a septic system, you'll want to have those inspections done too, and your purchase being contingent on the results of them. So backing up for a minute about this time frame piece. It's common in our area for the inspection period to be 7 days or 10 days. Again, it's something that you fill in that blank. But you need to understand what that time period is for. It's not the time period you have to actually complete the inspections. It's the time period you have to complete the inspections, to wait to receive the reports. Sometimes they don't come for a couple of days. and then to craft a reply to inspection, which is something that you provide the seller. And that's what's due in whatever time period. The 10-day period means you must provide your reply to inspection by that date, so that you can say, I want you to repair these things, or I want a credit. And then there is a time period of 5 days after that, unless you make a change on the agreement, that's the default, for the seller to respond to you. Maybe he wants to get his own contractors in there to give him an estimate, because if you asked for $12,000 and he says he thinks he can do it for $9,000, all those things. So there are these time periods. So that's kind of all the sections that you're going to fill in. A couple of things to understand about our agreement of sale. One is, we talked about days. On a Pennsylvania agreement of sale, all of the number of days that are stipulated, 5 days for this, 10 days for that, they are calendar days. Doesn't matter if it's a holiday, if it's a Sunday, it counts. And the counting system starts from the day after what's called execution. Execution is the date that everyone, the last person, has signed that agreement of sale. So the next day is day one of any of those periods. Another thing that I really highly recommend is that you talk with your agent so you're crystal clear on those deadlines. What do I have to do by when? And what the criteria are for you to be able to get out of the deal without losing your deposit money. There are very clear rules about how long you have and for what reason and what form you need to submit if you decide for some reason that you're no longer interested in the property, but you don't want to get caught losing your deposit money. So once you're under contract, a few things that you want to make sure you do. The very, very first thing, schedule those inspections. You don't want to be pushed till the end of your inspection period and not have had time to receive the report. If that happens, you have to ask if the seller is willing to extend the inspection, period. They may be, they may not be. So schedule them immediately. The next thing is, remember that deposit check. Make sure that that does indeed get to the listing broker's office within the stipulated time period. The last thing you have to make sure you do is send your lender a copy of that executed agreement of sale and begin what they refer to as the formal mortgage application process. The lender has to do certain things too within certain timelines, and if you don't alert them that you've now put a property under contract and you don't start that mortgage application process, then they won't be able to do their part to enable you to settle on time. So a little bit dry maybe, but I hope informative if you want to know exactly how an offer works here, what you need for it, and what that agreement of sale is going to ask you to fill in. I hope I've answered most of those questions. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. You feel free to contact me. And if you'd like to see any of the other videos in my Home Buying in PA 101 series, they are available on my website. Thank you.